Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. First, before we begin, I apologize for the delayed start today. Unfortunately, we were facing a number of technical issues. So, nevertheless, today let's get started with the Hindu analysis. And before I start, can you please let me know if the audio video is fine? Please type yes in the comments if I'm clearly audible and visible. So let's begin with the Hindu analysis for today and let's start with the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, if you are benefiting from our sessions, do support us with your likes and comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you want the PDF of the session, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. After the session ends, we will be sharing the PDF over here. So without wasting any time, let's get started and look at the first article. On the front page, the Hindu is covering Prime Minister Modi's visit to China and the SEO summit in Tianjin, which is taking place currently. We have covered this topic in the last few days as well. Even yesterday, we had a detailed discussion on this. So today, I will only talk about the outcomes of the India-China relations following the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. So let's understand what are the key takeaways from the meeting between the two leaders. What are the implications of this for the future of India-China relationship? And what is happening at the SEO summit? So today we will get to know as to what will be the final statement that will be issued by the SEO summit. And that is something we can cover tomorrow. But as of now, we can at least try and understand the developments that have taken place yesterday and today morning to basically get essentially to get a understanding of how PM Modi has been trying to reset the relationship with China. So during this much awaited interaction, both India and China have agreed to ensure that the border issue does not affect the larger relations between India and China. This is something which is very noteworthy. The Prime Minister has stated that India is willing to settle the boundary issue, to work out the boundary tensions that we have through talks which can provide for a fair resolution and a mutually acceptable solution. This has been the official position of India, which was reiterated by the Ministry of External Affairs as well. The MEA has stated that India is willing to talk to China to have a political dialogue about the boundary issue and ensure that we work out a solution which is fair to both the countries, which is mutually acceptable to both the parties. So this again shows the restraint which India has been showing despite China's repeated aggression over the last 4 to 5 years. Now, what is curious is that the response of China's President Xi Jinping to this statement that was made by Prime Minister Modi. When PM Modi stated that we are willing to settle the issue, that we should look for collaboration, we should maintain peace and tranquility at the borders, Xi Jinping's statement was slightly different. It's more nuanced. And this is what I want you guys to understand. Xi Jinping has stated that we should not allow the border issue to affect the larger relations between the two countries. Now, what does this mean? What's the finer imprint over here? Essentially, China is telling India that let the border issue be there. We will resolve it separately later. But unless and until we work together, we partner with each other, we will not essentially take up the boundary issue seriously. That is what China seems to be indicating. That China right now doesn't consider the border issue as a priority. Whereas for India, this has been the number one priority, especially since the Ladakh standoff. So look at the slight difference in our statements. India is appearing to be a little more submissive. India is appearing to essentially let the issue pass by, and we are looking for a settlement through talks which can provide for a fair solution which is mutually acceptable. Meaning we are hoping that China would reciprocate and work out a solution with us which is mutually acceptable to both the parties. Meaning, India is more interested in resolving the boundary issue so that peace and tranquility can be maintained at the line of actual control. But China's statement indicates that resolving the border issue right now is not a priority for them because China clearly has a slight upper hand. And Xi Jinping has said, let the border issue be there. That should not affect the other relations that we have, the economic ties, for example, or any collaboration between India and China to counter the US. So that part of the relationship should not be affected by the boundary issue. So China is essentially telling India that, look, we will settle the boundary issue when we want to settle it. That is the subtle message you get from this. So this again raises the question, to what extent can India trust China? Right now, India is warming up to China, seeking a reset with China, mainly because of the global circumstances. This is primarily driven by the US tariffs against India, how the US has almost become hostile against India. So this is naturally driving India to seek some support from China. China is reciprocating in this regard because China wants to have closer economic ties. It wants to focus on trade, on investment, which eventually benefits China. But when India brings up the border question, China is saying that let it be. Let's discuss this later. Let it get resolved on its own. But in the meantime, please focus on economic ties and trade relations. That is what China seems to be telling to India. So this again highlights the point that we can't entirely trust China because China has a completely different strategic priority. India's priority is to ensure that these tensions do not resurface. India's priority is to find a solution, a political solution as soon as possible, which is fair and mutually acceptable. But China is not showing that eagerness, that urgency is not there. Whereas from the Indian side, you sense some urgency from the Indian side to try and find a solution so that these issues do not recur. But China seems to be telling us, don't worry about it. Let the boundary issue be handled separately. But until then, you start focusing on the economic ties and trade relations. So this, in a way, puts us on the back foot. See, the media, the government might put a spin on this story that India, China are warming up and repairing the relationship. But please understand the nuanced, subtle message coming from China. It essentially means they have the upper hand. We will resolve the boundary issue when we want. But until then, focus on other aspects of the relationship. Right? So that is the message that's coming out of the interaction between the two leaders of India and China. Now, other than that, at the SCO summit in Tianjin, there have been some key developments. So PM Modi not only met with Xi Jinping, PM Modi also met with Russian President Putin. PM Modi interacted with several other leaders of SCO countries. And PM Modi also interacted with a senior general representing Myanmar's military junta. Myanmar, which is going through a civil war, has called for an election in another few months. It is gearing up for the election cycle, hopefully to put an end to the civil conflict which is going on in the neighboring country. So PM Modi has had an interaction with a senior general from Myanmar expressing hope that free and fair elections will be conducted and stability would be brought back into the country. PM Modi has reiterated the role of Myanmar in India's Act East policy and neighborhood first policy. So this was another noteworthy development which came out at the SCO summit. So today, the SCO leaders will finalize the Tianjin Declaration and a joint statement is expected to be released. Now the question is, will India sign the declaration? Will India be part of the joint statement that will be issued? Most likely, India will agree to all the provisions which are included in the Tianjin Declaration. So for this, we have to wait for some time. We need some more clarity. Once the official statements come out, maybe tomorrow, we can try and discuss as to what are the statements included in the Tianjin Declaration. Has India gained something or has India lost something? Because this SCO summit was extremely important. It was not just a diplomatic event. It's a battle fought without weapons a diplomatic battle between great powers. So this essentially will tell us what is the future for India when it comes to our balancing act between Western powers and the Eastern powers. So for now, this is more than sufficient. But tomorrow, day after, we will cover these topics in more detail through other videos, through our Hindu analysis, maybe through shorts as well. So we get a complete clear picture as to what happened at the SEO summit. Now, moving on, we have a very important column on page number 8 related to India's federal structure. A very important topic under Indian polity. So let's go beyond the article and break down this topic in complete detail. Now, this topic is in news because recently the Supreme Court of India, which has been hearing a case on the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir, the restoration of statehood of J&K, has issued a notice to the central government to respond to the petitioner who's demanding the restoration of statehood for J&K. So this matter is being heard by the Supreme Court, and it has asked the central government to respond as to why J&K's statehood has not been restored even now. So let's explore the topic of statehood. Let's understand how states are created, admitted, formed, or established in our country. What does the Constitution say about statehood? What is essentially the federal feature of our Indian Constitution? Right? So let's try to break down these important concepts. Now, when it comes to statehood, under the Indian Constitution, there are 3 different ways of creating a state. A state can be admitted. Through admission, a state can be added. This is one way of doing it. The other is establishment of a state. And the third is the formation or creation of a state. And all 3 are different. If you look at Article 2 of the Indian Constitution, Article 2 of the Indian Constitution provides for admission or establishment of a state. So a foreign territory can be incorporated into the Union of India, into the Indian Union. This is the process of admission. If a foreign entity has a stable polity, a stable political structure, and if it seeks to merge with India, then such a foreign entity can be admitted into the Union of India, and Article 2 covers this particular provision. But this has to follow the international norms that are laid down as per international law. So one example of India admitting a state would be Jammu and Kashmir in 1947. When the then ruler of J&K, which was a princely state at that point, Maharaja Hari Singh, when he eventually opted to join India, because initially Maharaja Hari Singh had opted for independence as per the provisions of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. So J&K initially had decided neither to join India nor to join Pakistan, but had chosen independence as per the given provisions of the Indian Independence Act. But as Pakistan made an illegal attempt to invade and occupy J&K, as Pakistan pushed tribal invaders with the backing of the Pakistani army, then Raja Hari Singh came under tremendous pressure. He was losing significant territory and then sought help from India, following which India placed a condition that India is ready to help, but J&K should essentially accede to the Indian Union. So Maharaja Hari Singh would go on to sign the instrument of accession. With the signing of the instrument of accession by the legitimate ruler, where a polity existed, a political structure existed, J&K was admitted into the Indian Union. So this is the process of admission. Establishment is also covered under Article 2. The example of Goa, Sikkim, these were established into the Indian Union. Again, international norms will have to be followed. As far as the international norms are followed and the constitutional provisions are also followed, states can be established into the Indian Union, like how Goa was acquired. Sikkim was showing that willingness as well when trouble began in the Chogyal dynasty in the 1970s. Then how India liberated Goa from Portuguese colonialism and with the support of the local population, integrated Goa as well into the Indian Union. These were cases of establishment. Goa, Sikkim, they are examples of these territories being established into the Indian Union as per provisions of Article 2 by following the international norms. Because see, whenever you are acquiring a new piece of territory, you should have the support of the local people. Majority of the local people should be in favor of it. And that is exactly what India ensured when Goa, Sikkim were established into the Indian Union. Then coming to formation or creation of states, this refers to the internal reorganization. The internal reorganization which is covered under the provisions of Article 3 of the Indian Constitution. So internally, the union has the authority to completely change the map, the geographical map itself. So either new states can be created, multiple states can be broken into different states, or parts of different states can be taken to create a new state. Take, for example, the creation of Telangana, the creation of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand. Right, in 1956, before the state reorganization was done, we had 14 states. Today we have 28, and before J&K was broken down into union territories, we had 29 states. So these new states that were created, they were primarily under the provisions of Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, where the Parliament has been vested with the authority. Based on the recommendation of the President, a bill can be moved in the Parliament to essentially create a new state. So internal reorganization is entirely the prerogative of the Union. Is that clear? Now, I will give you a question, a homework for you. Please answer this in the comments. Can India cede territory to a foreign country? What is the constitutional provision regarding this? What is the process? And is there any Supreme Court ruling regarding India ceding territory to another country? Please mention this in the comments with examples. Until now, we were talking about India acquiring territory, admitting new territories, carrying out internal reorganization. But my question to you is, can India cede its territory to a foreign country? Are there any constitutional provisions regarding this? What is the process through which we can cede territory? Is there any Supreme Court case related to it? And what are the examples? 5 questions to you, very simple questions. Read about this, take this as an assignment. Now, coming back to Jammu and Kashmir, as you all know, in 2019, the special status of J&K and Article 370 was abrogated by the Union government. The special provisions of Article 35A was also abrogated. Following this, the state of J&K was reorganized into 2 union territories. The Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. Ladakh has been brought under the direct administration of the center. In case of J&K, it has been provided with a legislative assembly and a lieutenant governor who acts on behalf of the center. This is the arrangement which has been provided for. By the way, please remember, this was the first time ever that a state had been downgraded into a union territory. This had never happened. So in 2023, when Supreme Court of India was examining the constitutionality of the abrogation of Article 370 and the special status and the reorganization of J&K, the Supreme Court upheld the developments of 2019 through which the Union had abrogated the special status under 370 and 35A and reorganized J&K. This was upheld as constitutionally valid. But however, the Supreme Court directed the central government to hold elections within a given deadline, to hold elections to the Legislative Assembly. Because for many years, J&K remained as a union territory under the center without a Legislative Assembly, which had been promised under the Reorganization Act. So Supreme Court placed a deadline by September 2024. You should conduct the elections. So according to this mandate given by the Supreme Court, elections were held last year. And as all of you know, there is an elected government in Jammu and Kashmir. Quite similar to the Union Territory of Puducherry, for example. Correct? The Supreme Court also gave a nudge to the center to restore the statehood of J&K after the elections. But for this, no deadline has been prescribed by the Supreme Court. In the same ruling delivered in December 2023, the Supreme Court directed the center to hold elections and ensure that Legislative Assembly is constituted. And a deadline was given for that. So center has fulfilled this obligation. Last year elections were conducted. So there is a Legislative Assembly and elected government in J&K today. In the same case, Supreme Court directed the center, gave a nudge that restore the statehood of J&K. But no deadline was given. No binding mandate was given by the Supreme Court. So this issue remains pending. And petitioners are approaching the Supreme Court that if statehood is not restored to Jammu and Kashmir, then it violates the basic rights of the citizens of J&K. This is the matter being heard with the Supreme Court. Now, let's look at the federal character of the Indian polity. To what extent are we federal? And is India having any unitary features? Because if you look at the Constitution of India, it reads that India or Bharat is a union of states. It essentially means that states have no right to secede from the Indian Union. Article 1 makes it clear that India or Bharat shall be a union of states. It's not like the federation that you have in the United States, where the federated states do have a right to secede. But in the case of India, it is indivisible. The union cannot be broken up at any cost. The Constitution doesn't allow for that. The usage of the word India reflects a unitary character. The usage of the term union of states, that India is a union of states, reflects that Indian polity is a mixture of a unitary structure with a federal polity. Essentially, experts argue that federalism, of course, is part of the basic structure. The Supreme Court also has clearly stated that federalism is part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So experts interpret this as Indian polity is federal in character, but unitary in spirit, meaning the union has been given certain centralizing powers over the states, over the federal units. Federalism exists for a certain reason. It is to preserve the jurisdiction of the federated units, to ensure that there is equitable distribution of resources and provide for welfare at the provincial level. But for maintaining the unity, integrity of the nation, to ensure the defense of the nation, the union has been given a certain priority in the Constitution. That's why the Indian polity is unitary in spirit, but federal in character. Federalism is part of the basic structure. There is no doubt about it. But the union does enjoy that additional power when it comes to maintaining the integrity of the nation, ensuring the unity of the nation. The usage of the word Bharat in Article 1 is more of a cultural connotation, according to the writer of this column, that signifies the diversity of the nation and unity in diversity. But the point here is federalism is a principle, a constitutional principle, which cannot be compromised, which cannot be eroded at any cost. Is that clear? Now, the word federation itself is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, whereas the word union is explicitly mentioned under Article 1. That's why experts interpret this as Indian polity is federal in character but unitary in spirit. So this again shows that federalism is integral to the Indian Constitution, to the Indian polity, while the union maintains a certain degree of unitary powers. Federalism cannot be compromised at any cost. States cannot be broken apart and downgraded into union territories at the will and wishes of the union. That is the reason why our constitution makers provided for a permanent house in the parliament, which is your Rajya Sabha, which cannot be dissolved. Look at the provisions of Article 83 of the Indian Constitution. Rajya Sabha is a permanent house which doesn't undergo any dissolution, meaning states have a permanent representation to bring up their demands in front of the union government. This again proves the point that federalism is a sacred principle which can't be eroded, diluted, or compromised. So the downgrading of J&K into union territories was essentially it was a direct hit on the very federal nature of the Indian polity, according to the writer of this article. That's why the writer is urging the union government to restore statehood to Jammu and Kashmir as directed by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court had given a nudge, but it didn't set any deadline or place any mandate. So there is a petition which is being heard again. So this will be a developing story and we will continue to track this. So now I hope you have a decent understanding of India's federal polity with a unitary bias. There is a clear unitary bias. The emergency provisions also shows the unitary bias as well. But the states have their own domain and jurisdiction, which is guaranteed under the constitution. So based on this, please take up this mains practice question. What are the processes enshrined in the Constitution of India for creating states? That's the first part of the question. How are states reorganized? Explain. This is the second part of the question. Now, as I promised, in every session, I will help you with your answer writing approach. Right? I'll try to provide a flow chart that you can follow for your answer writing practice. So in this answer, in the introduction, I want you to talk about Article 1. Since the question is mainly focused on the process for creating states and how states are reorganized, it's a clear reference to federalism and how it runs into conflict with the unitary bias in the Indian Constitution. So present the features of Article 1. India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states, which means states have no right to secede, and clearly point out the unitary bias which is there, which is inherent in this provision. But also point out that federalism is part of the basic structure. Though it's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, it is part of the basic structure of the Indian Constitution, of the Indian polity. And you can even make the statement that India is federal in character, but unitary in spirit. There is a unitary bias which is present in the Constitution. Once you set the tone, once you set the context, come to the body and talk about the different processes through which states are created in India. You refer to provisions of Article 2 and Article 3, that is admission and establishment and formation. Briefly discuss these provisions with examples. How J&K was admitted, Goa, Sikkim were established, the internal reorganization of India under Article 3. Discuss these provisions and that will basically cover the first half of the question. Next, how are states reorganized? This is where you will go into some details under Article 3 with examples of, let's say, Telangana or Jammu and Kashmir being reorganized. So give those examples to explain the reorganization of states and conclude your answer by pointing out that these features preserve the authority of the union to protect the unity, integrity of the nation while ensuring the autonomy of the states. How the jurisdiction has been defined. You can even bring a reference to Schedule 7 and how the subjects are clearly divided between the union, state, and the concurrent list to point out that federalism is inherent, though it's not explicitly mentioned. It's an integral part of the Constitution, a part of the basic structure itself. So this will make for a well-structured answer. Now let's move on to the next article. In the supplement section, where science and tech articles are published by the Hindu, there's a very interesting article related to coral reefs in the Indian Ocean region. So this article will help us understand the role of coral reefs in our ecosystems. And it helps us understand the impact of rising sea levels on coral reefs. See, this article has been published by the Hindu because recently a scientific study was carried out by a team of researchers. They studied how rising sea levels in the Indian Ocean historically has been impacting the health of coral reefs in the Indian Ocean, especially in the central Indian Ocean basin. This study has brought up some new findings. See, previously we had understood that rising sea level is a concern that started from 1990s onwards. especially small, low-lying islands such as Lakshadweep of India, Maldives, and the Chagos archipelago. These small islands, which are spread out across the Indian Ocean, they were believed to be vulnerable to rising sea level primarily post 1990s. This was our traditional understanding based on the scientific evidence that we had. But now the new research is presenting an argument based on scientific data that sea levels in Indian Ocean started rising not in 1990s, but many decades before this, maybe as early as 1950s itself. So this changes our very understanding of oceanography and its interaction with the other elements. The study has pointed out, based on the new data which has been brought out by the research, that sea level rise in the Indian Ocean might have been occurring from more than 70 to 80 years, starting maybe as early as 1950s. So this changes our very fundamental understanding of the Indian Ocean, that Maldives, Lakshadweep, and these small atolls are at greater risk than what we had estimated. So such studies are very valuable, very useful to plan our climate mitigation and adaptation strategies. So first, let me explain the role of coral reefs, why they are important. Now, when we talk about Maldives or Lakshadweep, I'm sure you would have heard the usage of the term atolls. We often say that Maldives is an atoll state. Lakshadweep archipelago is made up of atolls. These atolls are essentially the semicircle disc-shaped small islands, largely made up of coral structures. These coral structures, they lie at the right at the surface of the ocean, almost at the surface of the ocean. Because the height to which the coral structures will grow is determined by the lowest tide. The height of the lowest tide will determine the upward growth of the coral reefs. Corals will not outgrow the surface of the ocean. They are present right below the surface, and that is right below the lowest tide. Now, this is very essential because when corals are present in such shallow waters, that's why the waters in these atoll states are very shallow. If you've ever been to Maldives, in these atolls, just around the atolls where the coral structures are present, you will notice that the water is barely 4 to 5 feet deep. That's it. This essentially allows for sunlight to easily reach the coral structure where the process of photosynthesis will take place. Now, any further rise in the height of the water, right, if the sea level were to rise substantially, it will become much more harder for sunlight to penetrate, thereby disrupting the photosynthesis process, and it could basically destroy the coral structures. It could lead to coral bleaching eventually. That is why rising sea level is a very serious threat for corals. Coral reefs are considered as the rainforests of our planet. They are considered as the rainforests of the ocean because they are extremely biodiverse. Just like equatorial rainforests, which are known for their rich biodiversity and spread of flora and fauna. Similarly, coral reefs are considered as the rainforests of the ocean because of the richness that they have in their biodiversity. They provide food for various marine organisms. From small mollusks to small fish to larger fish depend on it. The marine food chain depends on it. In fact, several marine organisms take shelter as well in the coral structures, right from small microscopic organisms, algae, to the coral polyps, all the way up the food chain. Marine organisms are directly dependent on the health of the coral reefs that are present. That's why they are so rich in biodiversity. They are teeming with marine life. But rising sea level poses a direct existential threat for coral reefs because if the water depth increases, if corals go much more underwater, it will become harder for sunlight to reach the coral reefs, thereby disrupting the process of photosynthesis, affecting life forms, and eventually leads to the death of these corals. And it results in the process of coral bleaching. Then, along with this, we have other environmental concerns. We have the acidification of our oceans. Ocean acidification is another serious major concern. As more and more CO2 gets absorbed and dissolved into our seas and oceans, the oceanic water is getting acidified, which will result in the bleaching of the coral reefs. The right pH level has to be maintained. The right nutrient composition has to be maintained in the water for corals to thrive. Any such changes, be it in the sea level or be it with regard to the amount of dissolved CO2 or any change in the nutrient composition or salinity levels, they will all have a direct impact on the health of the coral reef. So that is why climate sciences and earth sciences, they focus on these basics to understand the anthropogenic effect, the effect of human activities on our natural ecosystems. Now, according to the Ministry of Earth Sciences, in the Indian Ocean region, sea level has been rising at the rate of 3.3 mm per year. Please make a note of this fact. In the Indian Ocean, the rise in sea level has been estimated by the Ministry of Earth Sciences through scientific assessments at the rate of 3.3 mm per year. This is the rate at which the sea level has been rising, according to government-backed research data. And also, if you look at studies of IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which acts as the primary think tank, the scientific think tank for the Climate Change Convention, the global understanding that we had, the traditional understanding was that sea level rise is more of a phenomena that started from 1990s onwards. That is essentially in the post-industrialization era. Because all the industrial activities of the last 150, 200 years had contributed to global warming, which had disrupted the climate cycles. So we assumed that from 1990s onwards, we were basically witnessing the rise in sea levels. But new studies and new data from the Indian Ocean shows that the sea level rise might have started as early as 1950s. So at least from 70, 80 years, sea level has been rising, which poses an existential threat for coral structures, especially the atolls in Maldives, in Lakshadweep, in Chagos group. The study has also established the impact of other climatic and weather events, such as El Nino and a negative Indian Ocean dipole is also said to have a negative effect on coral health. So such changes in climatic conditions, changes in the oceanography, they all have a direct role to play. So understanding these aspects is very crucial to plan for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Since many of these atolls are at the risk of submergence by the end of the century, if we have to implement a climate action plan to safeguard these atolls, to protect the coral structures, and to rehabilitate the population of these islands, to make those mitigation adaptation plans, you need this scientific understanding. So that is why this article is very insightful in that regard. So take up a simple practice question on this topic. Examine the interplay between coral reef health and rising sea levels. So try to bring out the interconnection between climate change, global warming, how it is impacting coral health, and use the example from the Indian Ocean. Now, coming to another interesting column on page 6, there's an article written by the Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, Hardeep Singh Puri. Hardeep Singh Puri was a former Indian diplomat. He served as India's permanent representative at the United Nations in New York. So following his service in the IFS, he entered politics. Now he is a union minister handling a very critical portfolio, petroleum and natural gas, that looks after India's energy security. So in this article, the union minister is essentially countering the policies of United States and the erratic decisions of Donald Trump. The union minister is making a very strong statement. You might remember Donald Trump, when he announced the 50% tariffs on India, he labeled the Indian economy as a dead economy. He clubbed India with Russia and he called that the economies of India and Russia are dead. Now, this was a very provocative statement that was made by Donald Trump. We have seen many such provocative statements coming from officials of the Trump administration as well. So the union minister is countering this narrative that the US is trying to build. The union minister points out that India is not a dead economy by any measure. Rather, India is a thriving economy. India is probably the lone bright spot right now in the global economic order. Because look at India's economic performance. Look at the numbers. The data tells you the picture. Look at the GDP growth that India has registered in the first quarter of the current fiscal year. In Q1 of the current fiscal, recently the GDP numbers were published. India has grown at an impressive 7.8%, which makes India one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. When all the other major economies are facing deflationary tendencies, they are stagnating as an economy, India still continues to register a very impressive performance. Yes, India did have a lot of challenges. We still have a lot of challenges, especially with regard to our GDP growth numbers. But the recent turnaround that we are seeing, the pickup in the growth numbers, is a very positive indicator that Indian economy is nothing but dead. This is a very strong counter to what Donald Trump was saying about the Indian economy. India right now is the fourth largest economy in market exchange terms. And in another few years, we will be the third largest by overtaking Germany by the end of this decade. By 2030, India will very soon overtake Germany in market exchange terms to emerge as the third largest economy after US and China. By 2038, it is expected that India would be the second largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity with a $38 trillion economy. $38 trillion economy. See, right now, the size of the Indian economy is a little under 5 trillion, right? Somewhere around 4 trillion. So in another 13 years, the Indian economy is expected to grow exponentially to be valued at $38 trillion. It would become the second largest in PPP terms, just after China, even overtaking the United States. So this by no means is a sign of a dead economy. Correct? That's what the union minister is pointing out. We have done phenomenally well when it comes to welfare. In the last decade alone, 24 crore people have been lifted out of multi-dimensional poverty in our country. See, US population itself is around 33 crores, I think. And India has lifted 24 crore people out of multi-dimensional poverty in the last decade alone. So these are not signs of a dead economy. These are signs of a thriving economy, an economy which can dominate the future in another 20, 30 years. So essentially, the union minister is sending a message to the US because this is official. It's as good as an official statement coming out from the government of India. It's a message from India to the US that US policies are wrong. They are inherently unfair, unjustified. The union minister talks about the need for Russian oil to meet India's energy requirements. The union minister correctly points out that India went ahead and bought Russian oil as United States was encouraging India to do that. Even when sanctions were placed on Russia, the US actually wanted India to buy Russian oil in order to stabilize the global oil prices. Because if the sanctions had kicked into full effect in 2022, and if Russian oil had been cut off from the global oil markets, it would have led to chaos in the oil market and oil prices would have shot up. And this would have had a cascading effect on the global economy. So it was India which prevented that. with India and even China becoming the largest buyers of Russian oil, which was encouraged by the US itself, India did a favor to the world by stabilizing the global oil prices, or else the per barrel cost would have probably touched 180 to $200. It's because of India, China buying Russian oil and bringing the Russian oil into the market that kept the prices stable, and it helped the global economy during a very difficult period. And more importantly, Western countries have not banned the purchase of Russian oil. Unlike the bans they have placed on Iranian oil and Venezuela's oil, on Russian oil, a ban has never been placed. So India has not done anything illegal or anything against the policies of these countries. In fact, US and Europe, they simply placed a price cap within which Russian oil could be bought. And each and every time in the last 3 years when we have bought Russian oil, we have bought within this price cap. Indian oil companies have never breached the price cap. So there's no argument for the US to blame this on India. The war in Ukraine is not because of India. Even if India stops buying this oil, Russia will still continue the war. That is the point. Putin will not be pressurized just because India would stop buying oil from them. Even if India falls under American pressure, hypothetically, the war in Ukraine will not come to end. So this again shows the limited understanding that US leaders and government officials have with regard to India and the dynamics India has with Russia. So that's why India is making these statements, taking a bold stand. India has not, it has not bent under American pressure. We have not fallen under American pressure. We have reiterated our independent foreign policy. And it again shows in the fact that PM Modi met with Putin at SEO summit. And India continues to buy Russian oil despite these American blackmailing tactics. But of course, the road ahead is still challenging for us. And that is why India is trying to look at alternatives to reduce our dependency on the American market for our exports. Is that clear? And also, please understand the criticism that we are getting from the West, that India is a laundromat, that India is basically funding the Ukraine war. These allegations are completely unsubstantiated. Again, there is no rational or logic in this. See, today India has become one of the largest exporter of petrochemical products, which is helping the European countries. European countries are buying petrochemical products from India, which are refined by Indian companies by buying Russian oil. And it is helping European countries to meet their energy requirements at a reasonable cost. So they can't be hypocritical about this. They can't accuse India of profiting from the war or funding the war in Ukraine. That is what any country would have done. Every country looks after its national interests. And especially for a country like India, where we have such dependency on energy imports, 85% of our crude oil is imported. So naturally, we will go and buy oil at the cheapest price. Whoever is selling it at the cheapest price, we will go and buy it from them. And that is exactly what every other country would have done. That's exactly what US has been doing from a long time. That's what European countries have been doing from a long time. So this is nothing but pure hypocrisy of the West. And that is exactly what the Union Minister is trying to expose. And he is making India's point very clear, taking a very strong stand that India will continue with this approach, with this policy. We will not stop buying oil from Russia. At the same time, we will seek to repair the ties with US as we seek to diversify our export markets. Next, on the front page, there is a related article related to the same topic. Since Indian exporters will be affected by the US tariffs, the 50% tariff which has kicked into effect will definitely result in cancellation of orders by the US importers. This was obvious, it was expected. Even when there were rumors that US would levy very high tariffs on India, many US traders and importers, they canceled the deals and contracts with Indian exporters because nobody wants to pay that higher price. So these cancelled exports could have a significant impact on Indian exporters, Indian producers. They could face a liquidity crisis. They could also fire the employees to sustain their businesses, resulting in significant losses of jobs. And also our exports to US and other developed markets has largely been based on labor intensive industries like garments, textiles, even pharma, leather, furniture, gems and jewelry, where millions and millions of Indians are employed. So direct hit on the exports and a liquidity crunch for the exporters and the producers will result in firing of employees from lakhs of factories in our country. So to protect those jobs, to protect the export industry, to protect our producers, to ensure enough liquidity is available to them, the Department of Commerce has come out with a multi-tiered strategy. The Department of Commerce is announcing a short term, medium term, and long term strategy to overcome this crisis. And in the short term, exporters who are affected, who are facing a liquidity crunch because of the cancelled orders, they will get a sort of a compensation, a sort of a liquidity support from the government in order to help them to tide over this crisis. So, this tells you that the government is not abandoning the exporters and the export oriented industries. The government will stand with them, support them when it matters, and help them to overcome the liquidity crisis that they are going to face. Next, on the front page, there's another interesting article related to environment, ecology, geography, and disaster management. The chief of IMD, India Meteorological Department, has stated that mini cloud bursts are on the rise in the Indian subcontinent. I'm sure all of you are aware that India has been hit with multiple cloudburst incidents in the recent weeks, especially in the northern northwestern parts of India, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, towards Punjab, Haryana belt as well. These intense rainfall which has been received, it has caused landslides and flash floods, causing significant damage to life and property. A cloudburst is an event where intense rainfall of more than 10 centimeters is received in 1 hour in an area of 20-30 square kilometers. So in a small area of 20-30 square kilometers, within 60 minutes, if more than 100 mm of rain is received, that event is classified as a cloudburst event. And IMD is the nodal authority. Under our disaster management policy and plan, IMD is the nodal authority to provide early warning and forecasting for such extreme weather events, be it for tracking heat wave, cold wave conditions, for tracking development of cyclone and the potential impact of cyclone and grading the cyclones. Then even with regard to estimating the monsoon arrival and the rainfall levels, and as well as cloudburst events. So all these extreme weather events are tracked by the IMD. It's the nodal authority to provide early warning forecasting services. Now, according to the chief of IMD, this year's monsoon has been slightly abnormal because some pockets of India have received above normal rainfall, but some parts of India have been receiving lesser than expected rainfall. This is also part of a larger trend that we are seeing in the last 15-20 years. So, according to the data, see, we have almost completed 3 months of monsoon this year, correct? Started in June, persisted through July, and now we are starting with September, right? August also has ended. So monsoon cycle will continue for a few more weeks. In the 3 months of the monsoon season that we have experienced, northern and northwestern parts of India have received substantially higher rainfall, which is way above the normal. This again is an indicator of changing climate and weather. The northern northwestern parts of India have received 26% more rainfall than the average. Then if you look at central and southern parts of India, even they have received above normal rainfall in the range of 8 to 9% above the average. Understood? So in central southern India, the rainfall is 8 to 9% above the average, above the normal expected. In northern northwestern part, it is 26% above the average. But what is really curious is the eastern and northeastern parts of India where the rainfall is below the expected normal. In fact, this is something we are seeing over subsequent monsoons in the last couple of decades. And the IMD chief is pointing out that not only rainfall patterns are changing right in front of us, but we are seeing more extreme weather events where mini cloud bursts are occurring. Even in very small areas of 5 to 10 square kilometer area, intense rainfall in 1 hour is leading to these landslides and flash floods. So it's very hard, almost impossible to provide early warning and forecasting for mini cloudburst events. Though technically it is possible to predict cloudbursts, IMD has been setting up the infrastructure with more Doppler radars, with more satellite data and rain gauges. Still, the ability to provide such localized forecasting is beyond reach. It becomes almost impossible to predict these mini cloudburst events, which are occurring regularly in very, very small pockets in the northern, northwestern parts of India. That is why these disasters are becoming harder to predict and prevent. If not prevent, at least mitigate the impact. Then another reason why northern, northwestern part of India is so affected by heavy rainfall and cloudbursts and flash floods is because of the collusion or the direct interaction of two different weather systems. The western disturbances coming from the Mediterranean, which comes from the western part of India, is colliding with the monsoon system coming from the Bay of Bengal. So, this interaction between the two different weather systems is causing very intense rainfall in the northern northwestern parts of India, that is in the Himalayan belt and in the Indo Gangetic plains. Understood? So, please remember this. On one hand, the monsoon is very active, and the monsoon winds come blowing in from the Bay of Bengal towards central, northern, northwestern parts of India is colliding with the western disturbances coming in from the Mediterranean. And that has been responsible for the extreme weather being witnessed in this part of the country. So, with this, let's move to the prelim section, take a quick look at the smaller articles, and after that, we can end the session for today. On page 9, there's a very important article related to a type of cyber fraud, a type of cyber crime which is being committed, known as APK scam. APK scams have been increasing and it has become a serious cybersecurity concern. So, what is a APK scam? How does it happen? What measures can we take to protect Indians and their money from falling prey to these cyber scamsters? So, let's understand this. Those who are using Android phones, I'm sure you must be familiar with the term APK. APK stands for Android Package Kit. Android Package Kit. It's essentially a executable file. This is how you download and install all your applications on your device. Just like in Windows operating system, you have the .exe files. Correct? In your Windows, let's say you have a laptop or a desktop running on Windows operating system. Here the application files that you download and install, they are in the .exe format. Similarly, on the Android ecosystem, it is the APK files which are used to install the applications, Android Package Kit. So when you go to the Google Play Store, download various apps, you're essentially downloading a APK file, the Android Package Kit of that particular application. Once downloaded, it will get installed. You have to give certain permissions. For example, let's say you downloaded the Unacademy app. You're downloading the APK file. Then you click on install and it'll ask for certain permissions. You give all the permissions. Permission to access your contacts, permission to access the microphone, right? All the permissions are given, then the file gets installed and the app becomes available on your device. Now, this route is being exploited by cyber scamsters. What they're doing is they're essentially carrying out social engineering. They are tricking their targets, their victims, to download these fraudulent APK files, which are basically loaded with a malware. Malware is a malicious software, a software designed with a malicious intention to steal your data, your identity, your passwords, etc. So let me tell you how this works. What is the modus operandi? You might receive a phone call or a WhatsApp call, or you might receive messages on Telegram or any other application saying that you are in some kind of trouble. Maybe they'll say that I'm calling from your bank. Your account is being frozen in another 2 hours because of some discrepancy. So they'll create that sense of urgency. They'll make you believe in that urgent phone call or text message that they are sending out. Or they'll say that they're calling from a government department. Maybe they already have some data on you. They know that you're beneficiary of certain government schemes. Maybe you're getting some scholarship, or you're getting, let's say, some subsidies. And they will say that if you don't download this application and provide your details immediately, you will not get that money anymore. Or they'll say that they are calling from your bank where you have a bank account. If you don't provide these documents for verification by downloading this app, they will say we are going to block your bank account. So they try to create that sense of urgency and they try to trick the victims, which is a classic case of social engineering. They're engineering your mind, playing with your psychology, right? They're so good that these files, the APK files which they ask you to download, they look very authentic. They use official logos, the color scheme, the overall design template. Everything looks very official. After the call, they will send you a message with the link to download the APK file. They will say, I'm sending you a link through message, through WhatsApp or through Telegram. Click on it, our application will download and you have to upload some documents. So once you do that, we will release the bank account or will release the payments from our side. So they make a promise like this, make you believe in that. It's very convincing how they build this story. And once you fall prey to this social engineering tactic, and once you click on the link and download that APK file, this APK file will contain the malware, which will basically give remote access to the attacker. And when it asks for permissions, you will grant the permission. You'll grant permission to access your contacts, your messages, your microphone, camera, etc., thinking you're downloading an original application. But it's a fraudulent APK, which is actually containing a malware. And the attackers will now get full access to your phone, all the data present on your phone. Now you might say, sir, the data, isn't it encrypted? Even if they get hold of the data, what will they do with it? But these scamsters are quite sophisticated. They can decode the encrypted data as well. They can now intercept all your OTPs, right? They can trigger requests from your device. And once they have that ability, they will immediately empty your bank account. You will see that all your savings have been taken out by these scamsters. And today, this type of scam is one of the fastest growing cyber scams in our country. In the last 2-3 years, especially, APK scams have increased exponentially. The Ministry of Home Affairs, State Police, and the Cyber Police divisions, they are reporting a massive surge in these cases. In some cases, the scamsters are sitting in India. In 70% of the cases, these APK files are developed within India by using local talent. They're coded by local developers. So there are few scam hubs in our country. For example, in Jharkhand, in the Delhi, Gurgaon, NCR belt, in Meerut, in Rajasthan, there are few scam hubs where local talent, they are recruited by these cyber mafias, and they use these APK files loaded with a malware, and they have an entire army who can reach out and distribute these APK links, convincing people to download these files. They will try to target maybe 100 people. Even if 1 or 2 believe in them and download the APK file, it's more than enough. They'll reach out to 100. If 1 or 2 fall prey to them, that's more than sufficient. They can loot that money. In 30% of the cases, the scamsters are from abroad. They are sitting in foreign locations. So when investigations are taken up, investigators are hitting a dead end because most of the servers are located abroad. They're not located in India. The data is being transferred abroad. Now you might ask, what about the money? Can't we track the money trail? Authorities have tried tracking the money trail, but it also hits a dead end because scamsters use something known as a mule account. What they do is they will basically rent the account of someone else. Tomorrow, if someone comes to you and they'll tell you that, please open a bank account, I'll pay you money for that. Let's say a scamster will come to you, they'll tell you that use your documents, give your KYC documents, open a bank account. I'll use it only for 2 transactions and I'll pay you 50,000 rupees for that. Now you'll get excited by it. You think that there's nothing to lose. Just open a new bank account. Allow this guy to carry out maybe 2-3 transactions and you'll get paid for it. That to a very good sum of money. So this is called muling an account, a rent account essentially. That's what scamsters do. They never use their actual accounts. They convince others to rent out their account for a couple of transactions. They move the money out quickly and push it into the crypto market. Once they take it out into cryptos, and now the essentially the money is out of the country, out of our jurisdiction as well. So in the last 4 years, cyber crimes have gone up by 900%. This is quite alarming. That is why the government is trying to take all possible measures to spread awareness amongst the public. You just have to be self-aware to prevent these scams from happening. Moreover, these APK files, they're designed to even bypass your routine antivirus softwares. They are so well designed that even your antivirus softwares will not detect this as a malware. It will treat this as a regular APK file. But once the scam is over, it's already too late, right? So the only way you can avoid falling victim to this is by being better aware about these practices, being self-aware, not to fall prey for these calls, these messages, and don't click anything that has been asked or pushed by someone else. Don't download anything. Don't run these apps on your phone. That is what you need to ensure. So that is something you should be aware of, a very important topic for both prelims and even mains. The Hindu carries a beautiful infographic on this. I've added that in the PPT. What is APK scam? How the entire modus operandi works. It's all depicted in this infographic by the Hindu. You can go through this later. I've explained the same. We've covered everything, but you can go through this slide later. Then coming to the next topic, on page 10, there's an article referring to the Ramon Magsaysay Award, a very prestigious award in Asia in the field of governance, in the field of leadership. So, an Indian NGO has won the Ramon Magsaysay Award. By the way, this is the first time ever an Indian organization has won this award. Now, let me tell you what is this award, the background. Ramon Magsaysay was a legendary leader of Philippines, the former president, known for his integrity, known for his good governance. So in his name, this award was instituted in 1957. It was instituted in 1957, and the first award was given out from 1958 onwards. Every year, usually 3 awardees are chosen, and it is given to both individuals and as well as to organizations. It recognizes incredible work in the field of governance, leadership, and values like integrity, etc. They are recognized, and it is even considered as the Nobel Prize of Asia. So it's a very prestigious award. Many Indian leaders and individuals have won the Ramon Magsaysay Award. Many civil society activists, government officials, and top leaders have been the recipient of this prestigious award. But for the first time, there is an organization which has won this award, which is Educate Girls. It's a non-government organization working in the field of women education, especially in remote rural areas. This NGO is working with underprivileged girls, trying to educate them, promote education amongst underprivileged girls. So in recognition of this role, Educate Girls NGO has been awarded this year's Ramon Magsaysay Award. The 2 other awardees are an environmental activist from Maldives by the name Shahina Ali, and a very popular human rights activist, Ferdinand Flaviano Antonio Villanueva of Philippines, who opposed the human rights abuses that occurred under the previous regime of the Filipino president, who has now been arrested by the International Criminal Court. When Rodrigo Duterte was the president of Philippines. He was the former president. Under his regime, there was an anti-drug operation which was carried out, right? Focused on countering drug trafficking and even terrorism, which affects Philippines. So in these security operations, the then Philippine leader was accused of committing serious human rights violations. Now he has been held guilty of it. Arrest warrant was also issued by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and he has been arrested as well, given into the custody of ICC as well. So it was this activist who spoke up and stood up against the human rights abuses. So these three they are sharing the Ramon Magsaysay Award of this year. So just make a note of these basic facts. Coming to the last article for today, Indian Army has conducted a very special exercise in the northeast of India. Exercise Yudh Kaushal 3.0. It was carried out in the Kameng sector of Arunachal Pradesh, very close to the border with China. It was led by the Gajaraj Corps of the Indian Army that's based out of Tezpur in Assam. And what is special about this exercise is that the exercise saw a fusion of modern technology, state-of-the-art weapon systems and platforms with traditional battlefield skills. In fact, the Indian Army has raised a dedicated formation. A dedicated set of platoons have been raised by Indian Army known as the Ashni platoons. Have you heard of it? The Ashni platoons of Indian Army, they specialize in blending the traditional war fighting methods and skills, that too in a mountainous forested area like the Northeast. They fuse that with modern technology, state-of-the-art weapons. And these Ashni platoons are changing the face of warfare and India's military preparedness in the Northeast. Because don't forget, the Siliguri corridor of India, which is a strategic choke point, a vulnerable choke point, is under increased pressure from China-backed initiatives via Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. There is a persistent Chinese threat to the Siliguri corridor and the northeast of India. The developments in Bangladesh and Nepal, the rise of hostile governments and leaders and hostile activity is constantly posing a threat to Siliguri corridor and the northeast of India. So Indian armed forces and intelligence agencies have been on a very high alert since the last 1.5 years towards the Siliguri region and the northeast region. It's in this backdrop the Indian Army is conducting this exercise where modern technology and state-of-the-art weapon systems were deployed in this exercise. Drone-based surveillance was used, real-time target acquisition and target practice was carried out, along with the usage of air littoral surveillance and synchronized network-centric battlefield environment with focus on air defense. So it's one of the most sophisticated military exercises to have been conducted with the usage of modern technology with the newly raised forces that specialize in bringing the traditional fighting techniques together with modern technology. This also is it's a recognition for our indigenous defense industry as well, because most of the platforms that were used in this exercise, they are designed and produced indigenously by our domestic defense firms. So please make a note of the name of this exercise, exercise Yudh Kaushal 3.0. So on this note, I bring today's Hindu analysis to an end. I hope you guys have understood each and every topic. As we have promised, our discussion will always be comprehensive. We will cover each and every topic which is relevant in the newspaper from different perspectives, so that be it for prelims or mains, you should be able to answer any question based on these topics. I hope you guys feel the same. I hope you guys feel benefited from these classes. If you do, let us know through your comments, press the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.